And that was a catalyst for me to dive really deep and understand this human experience. What does it mean to rehabilitate? How does the body operate? What is nutrition? How can eating better maybe help me heal quicker? What is exercise as medicine?
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State podcast. If you haven't been watching already, I'm wearing the Squid Game track outfit because I was player 330 on the most recent Netflix reality show, #1 hit in America, Squid Game, The Challenge. Would love to talk about more of that experience in detail on a future podcast. But on today's podcast, I have a very, very special guest, good friend, somebody that I actually met over social media, but goes to show that just because you connect online and not in real life just yet doesn't mean those connections can't be filled with deep, meaningful conversations. And this brother is a top-notch health entrepreneur. You're going to get to know him better on the show. But before we get into it, if you are new to the podcast, welcome into the Thrive State podcast. This is a place where we interview the world's thought leaders in health, longevity, performance, biohacking, relationships, really to give you the tools and tactics to bring your life to the next level, to bring you into what I call the Thrive State. And if you are a returning listener, if this podcast has given you value, please do us a favor by leaving a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard. That is really going to help this show grow. And if you don't already know, we've got the Thrive State Summit coming up. It is an entirely free event where I interview 50 of the world's thought leaders in mental and emotional wellness to give you the tools to elevate yourself, for you to be able to handle the stresses in your relationships, in your finances, in your work, in your health, so that you can ground yourself and show up as who you truly are, rather than reacting to the stresses that are thrown at us almost every single day. This is an entirely free event. I interview people like Dave Asprey, Jim Quick, Bruce Lipton, Zach Williams, Mariel Hemingway, Josh Axe, so many more people. You'll want to check this out at thrivestatesummit.com. I now have the privilege of introducing my next podcast guest. He is a social media buddy that Instagrammed, DM messaged me, and said, "Hey, man, what's going on?" And really just poured into me, showed me who he was as a human being. And yes, it could happen over the web, over social media. He's an inspiring voice in health and wellness. He is the podcast host of Everford Radio, Mr. Chase Chewning. He has got quite an incredible story. He's a renowned wellness entrepreneur and podcast host who's interviewed the top people. Check out his podcast guest list. It goes from Sean Stevenson to just so many more. In this conversation, you'll explore the depths of mental and physical resilience, the journey of personal transformation, and the power of authentic connections. We dive deep into Chase's life, and it becomes really vulnerable with his own healing, his own journey. And I hope that you can take some inspiration from it so that you could take actions to take your life to the next level. In this conversation, he shares his unique insights on overcoming life's challenges, the role of neuroscience in personal growth, the impact of meaningful relationships and health and being. This episode is a must-watch for anyone looking to enhance their resilience and move forward in life with purpose and passion. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy this conversation with Chase Chewning. Chase Chewning, welcome to the Thrive State podcast, brother.
Good to be here again. Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure. Great to meet you and the audience here today.
Everybody's familiar with a segment of the show called the 5 to Thrive, which is basically 5 quick questions pulled out of my behind, 1,000 points each, 30-second answers at most. And if you win a healthy meal on me. And now that I know that we live in the LA area, that probably shouldn't be too difficult to fulfill on. So the question comes to you, Chase Chewning, are you ready to play the 5 to Thrive?
Fire away. Let's go.
Question number 1 for 1,000 points. What did Chase Chewning want to be when he grew up as a kid?
That is a really good question, and it's one that I've reflected on quite a bit, because you think everybody would have an answer. I want to be a fireman. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be this. I want to be that. Looking back, I think I really only had one profession in mind, and that was I wanted to be my dad. I grew up witnessing him as this military guy and having fun, going to visit on base and climbing in the tanks and all this stuff. And that was really the biggest thing that stood out. And I'm sure, like we'll get into, I definitely followed in his footsteps in that way.
Sounds great. 1,000 points there. Question number 2 for another 1,000 points. If you could have a superpower of any sort, what would it be?
To be Wolverine. That's obsessed. Wolverine ever since a kid, X-Men, but Wolverine, just I want to be Wolverine so bad.
I see. You've got the ability to grow the sideburns.
Yeah, I got the hair, the thickness, the growl is there. I run around just holding my hands up, waiting for claws to come out at any moment, and all the superpowers that come with being the Wolverine for sure.
2,000 points thus far. Our third question is, if there was like a moment in time, a quote, a book, a mindset shift that you remember early on in your age, it's like, oh my God, everything in my life just shifted because of this thing. Go ahead and there's probably tons of those moments in your life, but there's one come to mind right now.
I would really kind of wrap it all up in one book, kind of my biggest transformation period when I discovered personal development was through one book, and it was Ego is the Enemy. And
Ryan
Holiday. I mean, I'm a big fan of Stoicism now because of him, but that book, I literally would have to put down and walk away because I was just blown as to how much, ego is in all of us and how to really kind of navigate and live with it. Of course, that's the ego talking, but I was like, I don't think I'm an egotistical person, but that book showed me so many profound ways where ego drives and maybe where in the passenger seat and how to kind of flip it. But the book as a whole blew my mind.
Oh, awesome. 3,000 points. Question number 4 is, you are placed in front of a stage of 100,000 people. I hand you over the mic and say, Chase, what is your go-to karaoke song? I'm going to play it right now. Which one would you tell me?
Oh, damn. Oh, geez. Some buddies of mine back in college, whenever we would do karaoke, I think it was a joke, but I was just there for the ride. It was Three Doors Down, Superman was that song.
Oh,
I think it was the title of it, yeah. If I go crazy now, would you still call me Superman? Something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Would you be there holding my hand? Yeah.
All right, okay, here we go. I'll make sure I pull that up, the next time.
Please don't.
Just have it randomly come up there. Chase Chewning, come on down. Question number 5 is, how would you like to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered as a human that gave more than he took and lived out of integrity.
Yeah. Wow. 5,000 points right there. You win a healthy meal on me the next time we meet. And I just want to pick up the conversation from that last point. This is a different podcast. I usually at least get some podcast notes from, my assistants in terms of where the podcast should go, some history. We dig in a little bit. But the way we met was so fortuitous. And it was just like, this random person, I think you DM'd me first, but it just seemed like, there was already a familiarity and you approached it in such a way where you were just like, hey man, like, love what you're doing. Let's connect. And you threw in a couple of voicemails. Like, people don't do that. And I thought it would be fun because we were talking about meeting up IRL, and I had to look up what IRL was in real life. Sorry. And I was thinking, you know what? Before we meet, I'm going to get to know you on the podcast. So we'll just take this almost sort of like, the first date with Chase and Kien. And, I did do a little bit, right before we hopped on here, and I listened to the conversation you had with your younger brother. So give me a little bit of background as to who you were. And I'd love to be able to connect deeply and dive into some of that stuff. But before we do, you just said someone that gave more than he took. And I remember when you first reached out to me, it was just sort of, hey, let's meet up in real life. Let's see what I can do. And I know I was working on this mental health summit I asked you about, and you're like, how can I help? Where was this concept of, giving more than you take? When did you start developing that? Is this something that, and it seemed like with your conversation you had with your younger brother too, you were always somebody that seemed to have a sense of service first mentality. And I wonder if that's something you picked up from your dad or sort of your upbringing. So go ahead and take us from there.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. That last part you talked about there, I really do give a lot of credit to nature and nurture in my upbringing. Growing up in a small family, but a tight-knit family, and not coming from a lot in terms of financial means, but we had love, and we had land, and we had each other, and we had our garden, and we had, a good time. And I never really knew anything other than that, but there was service involved. We were all supporting each other. It took a village, it took our own village. Like I said, my father was in the military. He was away quite a bit, living with my grandparents, oldest of three. So there are a lot of different unique family dynamics going on that out of the gate, I didn't really have any other choice but to be a part of. And so there's an element of nature, element of nurture there for sure. But, I've reflected on this a lot. And when I look at, what I do in a professional sense nowadays, and just also the personal character that I have and how to navigate both, I've gotten really curious as to where did this come from? Because I have like this kind of compulsion. I can't not help somebody. I can't not immediately throw my ass on the line. I can't not immediately start trying to connect dots for people. And I've wondered where this really came from. Yeah. Now, this is my own psychoanalyzing here. I haven't had formal therapy or mental health work around this particular matter, many other matters for sure. And I really retrace back to what I believe to be my very first memory ever as a young child. And I was about 4 years old, and coming down, playing in the field or coming off down to like a small hill on my grandparents' property where I was growing up, I stumbled upon, or I saw my father and mother sitting down with their backs facing me, facing the back of the house, the back of the property. And I could just tell that this wasn't a fun conversation. And my mother was very upset, and I could hear and kind of see her crying and shaking. And they weren't yelling at each other. It wasn't a hostile argument. It was just a hard conversation, I could tell. And I just remember hearing a few distinct words of, what are we doing here? Some things around money. So I kind of got this sense that my mom was uncertain. Reflecting back now, I'm 4-year-old Chase. 4-year-old Chase definitely could not comprehend all this, but it was imprinted for damn sure. She had uncertainty as to her place in life, as to our place in life there, also financial concerns. And I remember now kind of panning out on that experience. What I also saw was my brother and sister in this other room, this large window in the front living room with my grandmother. And so I was the only person at that time who had this unique vantage point of my entire family coexisting together, but seeing unique experiences happening. Mm-hmm. I was seeing this hard conversation with my parents. I was seeing my brother and sister and my grandmother. I'm sure my grandfather was floating around somewhere. And in that moment, I realized what I've kind of psychoanalyzed myself now was, I was the only person that saw the big picture. There were multiple people going through different experiences, and I was the only person that saw the big picture. So if anybody were able to connect the dots, it was going to have to be me. No one else was panned out like I was. I literally was up on a hill looking down on my world at the time. And it makes total sense to me now. And what I go through in life now, I just feel like I get connected with you, and I get connected with another person. I'm a curious person by nature, but also as a wellness entrepreneur and podcaster, it is my life, it is my livelihood to connect and converse and communicate with other people and understand their stories and what they're doing in the world. And then it's just this innate compulsion, really, like, you need to know this person, or, you're working on this. Absolutely. I think these people could support you. And I just don't know how to shut it off. And my understanding of where all that came from is from, like a lot of things in life, a very early childhood experience.
Yeah. Without being a therapist to you at all, but I understand how, certainly as kids, we definitely desire safety, love, and connection. And for you, if you were able to make the meaning of, wow, I could see things together and become a problem solver to give this entire unit safety, this is something that you leaned in on. So it's beautiful. When you connected with me, I live in Los Angeles, and some people say that LA could be, a very difficult place to navigate because so many transactions or so many interactions are more transactions than they are relational. But I certainly didn't feel that, with you at all. And this is something that I was like, this is actually a real person reaching out, just to deeply connect rather than somebody hitting.
What does this guy want from me? Why is he talking to me?
Right. Well, I mean, here's the other thing too. I think once you've kind of been, I think normally I'm a very trusting person, that's gotten me burned a couple of times, but I was told never give that up because that's just who I am as a person. But, you could always sort of have a spidey sense as to the energetic that is coming into the room. Even if they don't say it, you could feel their intention. And I just felt like, hey, here's just some guy who just deeply wants to connect. So that one, I don't know what it is in me that you wanted to connect with, but I feel very honored that you did.
Well, I'm glad that came across, Kien. And I'll say one thing real quick to that. How I found you was through a mutual homie now. I saw after you were on Sean Stevenson's podcast, The Model Health Show. Yeah. And without going too far into detail, but I quite literally owe a lot to what I'm doing today professionally to that man. He was what he was doing on the Model Health Show and how I found him, when I found him years ago, what I was going through in my life personally and professionally. I saw a lot of potential and I saw a lot of what I wanted for myself personally and professionally in what he was doing. And so, I'm so grateful now to call him a friend, and he's been on, we've done podcast swaps for years now. And so anyone, it's like, once you really get in good with somebody and you see that they're friends with somebody else, you're like, okay, cool. Like it's like all the groundwork is done. All the vetting has been done more or less. I was like, you know what, if Sean's cool with him, then I would love to see what he's got going on in the world.
Oh, that's beautiful. And let's talk about it right now. So you are a podcaster, but this wasn't probably those initial things that you said you wanted to be like your dad. So walk us through the story of maybe what that relationship was like, how you ended up in the Army, and then from how you left the Army, how you got into podcasting.
So how I got into the military was, I think a lot of people maybe can relate, coming from a small town, coming from maybe a family that doesn't have a lot of financial means, the future can be scary. You think that you're supposed to be going down these steps when you don't even know if those steps exist for you. You don't know if you know how to build them or you can afford to buy them, so to speak. And so I was like many people in high school, halfway through senior year. So it's that time to take SATs, PSATs, apply to college. And in the back of my mind, I thought, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. Everyone else in school is doing it. But I legitimately didn't know if it was a reality for me and my family. And in pursuing some colleges, I began to have much more serious conversations with my parents, my stepmother and my father at the time. And my father, who was a military man, pretty much every generation in my family, some man, a male, has served. And so he just kind of shared more of that experience with me. It wasn't like, hey, everyone's done it, so son, you're going to do it too. He just really man to man shared his experience with me, why he did it, the value he got out of it, and why he thinks that it might be a good choice for me as well. And I was very curious about that. The aspect of legacy really landed on me, and I liked that, and I leaned into that. But I don't know, I wasn't 100% convinced. But what really did it in for me was when I got down kind of the timeline of, all right, Chase, you need to commit. You need to, are you going to be looking in the military? You've got to get your scores into colleges at a certain time. You got to apply. Deadlines were on the horizon. I had another very real conversation with my father, and he just looked at me dead in the eyes and he goes, Chase, if you want to go to college, if you get in, whatever you want to do, I support you. Financially, I don't know how we'll do it, but I'll figure it out. And I kind of had just this gut check moment where maybe it was just maturity, being 17 years old finally at the time. I had this understanding of money and what it means to raise a family that I never had before.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast thus far. Now, I wanted to give you a really neat resource that I've been working on for the past year. Are you living with chronic stress, burnout, or the nagging symptoms of anxiety and depression? Do you find yourself battling fatigue or brain fog or feeling like you're not performing at your best? Well, what I've been working on all of this year is made especially for you. It is an online virtual event called the Thrive State Summit. You can register now for free at thrivestatesummit.com. But what it is this: you get to connect with and learn from 50 world-renowned thought leaders, experts, and some of your favorite celebrities. We've got people like Bruce Lipton, Vishen Lakhiani, Dave Asprey, Dr. Josh Axe, all united with a shared mission to tackle the mental health crisis that is impacting each and every one of us. Now, the Thrive State Summit isn't just another event. It is really my hope that it becomes a catalyst for change, particularly in this fast-paced world. And so what can you expect? You're going to expect to take home life-changing takeaways from all our experts, activation sessions to be able to bring you into states of calm and relaxation, really all the resources for you to become the best version of yourself. And finally, proceeds from the Thrive State Summit will go to 4 mental health nonprofits improving Rare Impact Fund, the Trevor Project, Good Days, Genius Recoveries. So please, if you invest in yourself, and please share this resource with your friends and family members. It's something I poured my entire heart into this past year, and I know it's going to help so many people. So register now at thrivestatesummit.com.
I realized that, if I pursue college, I am going to potentially, most likely, be a financial burden to my parents, to my family. And I did not want that. I knew what it took just to raise us. And my father, after getting out of the military, was an entrepreneur and going through all kinds of wild ups and downs in business. And I didn't want to add that to them. And so that kind of pushed me over my choice to join the military. So I enlisted, actually. I swore in halfway through my senior year of high school. On Christmas break, everyone's chilling. I'm raising my hand, swearing in. This was 2003 when I then finally enlisted. And the plan was to do 20 years. In the military, you can do 20 years. It's a great opportunity to fast track to retirement. And so at 17, I thought, at 37, that's not that old, which is crazy because I just turned 38 last week. And so if my original plan had stuck, I would be wrapping up this first big chapter of my life plan. My retirement would be probably what happened a few months ago. So I enlisted for 6 years. I joined the Army, active duty, went into the military intelligence community, became a linguist and intelligence specialist, and actually became a Russian linguist and intelligence specialist for the next several years. And about 2 years in, my father actually passed away. He was diagnosed terminal with Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. And I'm sure, as you can kind of hear my story so far, my father and I had a very unique conversation. He was my best friend. He was my confidant. He was my guy. And that rocked my world. So much so that it just became too much. And so I decided that, you know what, living, dying, I don't really care. The difference, it doesn't really matter to me. I was never suicidal, but I truly just gave up. Like, I don't care if I live or die anymore. And I recognized that, you know what, Chase, you're in probably the best occupation in the world if living and dying isn't a care of yours, to have that be a reality. So I began to actively volunteer for deployments. I, was hanging up what I was doing in the Russian intelligence field to just go be an intelligence specialist and boots on the ground in Iraq or Afghanistan, anywhere that they would take me, basically. And so, long story short, had a deployment opportunity come through. It was looking promising. But before you go over there, as we call it, you got to run through pre-deployment training, got to go through war games, got to do all this stuff. And so I was in a training exercise and was leading an ambush against what we call the OP4, the opposing force, the fake enemy. And in that ambush, just tore my hamstrings, freak accident, my body moving the wrong way, and suffered trauma to my L4 and L5 vertebrae. Basically, my low back kind of went one way, the rest of my spine went another way. And then it just turned into much more significant issues with my hips. And so I wound up having to get reconstructive surgery in both my hips, yanked from that deployment opportunity, yanked from my unit, put at a completely different medical base across state, really. And I was just a patient for the next almost a year and a half, going through these reconstructive surgeries, rehabilitation, therapy, in the hospital, on bed rest, basically having to learn how to walk again twice. And so that really cut my career short. So after 6 years, the Army medically retired me and was like, hey, you're no longer useful to us. No matter what your plan was, you were going to give us 20. We had 6. Thank you. Here's some disability. Here's some benefits. Go on your merry way. And I then was just like, I can't accept this. I can't accept this. I'm 24 years old. I've got a wheelchair on the roof of my car and a cane in my back seat. And I got to rely on both, and I got to rely on other people just to get around and to live. This can't be it. I'm not willing to accept this as my future. And that was the catalyst for me to dive really deep and understand this human experience. What does it mean to rehabilitate? How does the body operate? What is nutrition? How can eating better maybe help me heal quicker? What is exercise as medicine? And so about 3 weeks after getting medically discharged from the military, I enrolled in school back in Virginia. I enrolled in an exercise science program, and that was a catalyst for me into everything I'm doing now. I became obsessed with the human potential. That leveled me up in my rehabilitation. And then I found it as a profession as well. I became a trainer, became a certified health coach, then went on to grad school, got my master's in health promotion and nutrition, was a clinical health coach and wellness director for a concierge medical practice for several years. And all of that led me up to the curiosity of what else can I do? How else can I learn? I discovered podcasts. I discovered the Model Health Show, in fact. And that was the next catalyst in my life that changed the trajectory of my life entirely, because it wasn't long after that I hung up the coaching hat, hung up all that stuff that I went to school for and what I thought was going to be my next profession, to hop on a microphone and learn how to do this thing full time.
And that's beautiful. And you've been doing it, since 2016, you said. I can certainly say that, people who have started, I wonder everybody has a podcast now. I started mine back in 2021, actually, the year of my daughter's birth. I birthed my book, my podcast. It's a slow growth process. What can you say for somebody who wants to launch something like that now?
Just do it. Literally just hit record. I joke because my brother does have one. Literally everybody and their brother has a podcast now. And I give my brother a lot of crap because he's always a couple years behind me in the trends. So he has one, and it's great. And it's something that I think a lot of people view right now as it's too saturated. Oh, why should I do one? I don't have anything to say. It's not going to work. Who's going to listen? Who's going to watch? A lot of people are doing it, but I'm here to tell you that about only 40% of the now 3+ million shows that are on Apple Podcasts are considered active. And active meaning they're putting out at least one new episode every 90 days. So it's got a lot of attention right now. A lot of people are doing it, but the vast majority, overmajority, are not sticking with it. So if you can just commit and you can just hit record and put it out there for more than 90 days, you are already better than the vast majority of people out there doing it. So I'll caveat by saying the podcasting scene is something that I think, in order to have a really fair assessment as to, yes, this is working for me, I have some markers for ROI, whatever that looks like, it's worth my time, worth my money, worth my resources, I'm getting money out of it, I'm getting enjoyment out of it, I'm getting clients out of it. If you can commit to a year, I think after a year is the best way to really fairly assess, okay, yeah, I'm going to keep going, or time to table this.
Got it. And what's your approach to your podcasting now? Are you thinking, anyone that interests me, I just want to, interview? Is there a storyline that you like to sort of carve in terms of the messages and the people you bring in? What is your approach, and what would you like to bring out in your conversations?
Great question. It's definitely shifted over time. When I started the show, I was still working full-time as a clinical health coach, was a wellness director, so I was a very busy guy. I was seeing patients every day in 2 offices out of DC. I managed a team of about 7 to 9 coaches and 7 to 9 other medical facilities up and down the East Coast. And so I needed something that was going to make me better at my job. And it was very health, fitness, wellness focused. Those were really kind of the through lines and the only guests that I would have on. Since leaving that career and stepping out into the entrepreneur space and what really the world of personal development, self-help, human optimization has to offer, it's definitely grown and evolved from just pure fitness and nutrition. Not to say that I don't still have those types of guests on. Yesterday, in fact, I sat down with a great gentleman, an MD and PhD from USC Keck Medicine School, doing incredible things in the world of pharmacology and nutrition and metabolic health. But then right before that, I had an archaeologist on the show who discovered literally a whole new species of, air quote here, humans, this Homo nominid. I'm butchering the title, but so you can understand, those are two very drastically different categories. And so as I have grown as a person over the years, and I've realized that there are a lot of other ways out there that I can become a more physically and mentally resilient person, that has definitely translated into the types of guests that I'm looking at. Overall, the biggest through line is I'm looking for people that embody the mantra of ever forward. Do you live a life ever forward? This philosophy that was passed down to me from my father, that is how he lived his life and how my family grew up living their lives. And so it's got a little bit of legacy, but also a little bit of what are you doing in the world? How do you view obstacles? What contributions are you making to your community, to the world? How are you making your life and the world better, at the same time? How are you taking these adversities and turning them into your advantage? How are you choosing daily to move forward? And that's really what I'm looking for now. And it just so happens that looks like, a celebrity, that looks like an author, that looks like an influencer, that looks like a medical doctor, it looks like a lot of different things. So as I've gotten clarity to how I want to live my life and kind of molding my father's philosophy into my own, I have a much clearer through line to the types of people, messages that I want to sit down with and unpack those messages with.
Yeah, one of the really fun things that I find when I interview other people that have shows is the vast amount of knowledge, personality, and fun and quirky moments. So I want to let people know about the Ever Forward podcast. So first of all, having the deep voice you have really makes podcasting great. So I'm pretty sure you've certainly got the voice for podcasts, but look, you've got the face for video as well, my friend. You've got a nice little combination there. But
today was haircut day, trim the beard. Want to look my best for you in the audience here, man. So it's all for you.
Oh, I appreciate it. I'm blushing right now. But what was the quirkiest health tip that you think you've ever got on your show?
Oh, wow. Man, I have heard some things. So this one never actually made it to air because that's happened a few times. And I don't know if but I was talking with someone who began to tell me about their urine fast.
Okay.
It has a name, the golden diet, or there's a name for this.
Okay, so it's not fasting from urinating. It's fasting with just consuming urine.
You only consume your own urine.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a pretty wild thing. And now I'm not saying, I don't know, it's not real or no benefits. I don't know. It's definitely a thing. But that was just something that, I'm sorry. I need to become more educated on this. I need to really wrap my head around this. I don't know how this is going to really serve my audience, but I'm sure, as you can imagine, man, I hear a lot of different stuff. A lot of people who are just so diehard, like, This is the way, this is the truth, this is the light, this is the diet, this is the workout. And I definitely put my guard up a little bit with anybody that's just so diehard. This is the only way. But the urine diet, that one sent me.
Yeah. Okay. Not that one. Have you ever had a fanboy moment in one of your podcasts?
Me as a fanboy, or meeting somebody?
You as a fanboy. I mean, somebody as your guest, and then all of a sudden you're kind of fanboying out on the person that you're interviewing.
I mean, he's going to get way too much credit here on this episode, but Sean, again, seriously, that guy, I credit so much of my show and inspiration to what he has done with the Model Health Show and what he's done with his life and career. The first time that I met him was at a live event in DC, actually, right when I was getting rolling with my podcast. And it was like a live podcast event. It was super cool and amazing. And then literally he was just on the show again for the third time now, maybe a month ago. And I swear, every time I sit down with him, I'm like, how the hell is Chase Chewning sitting across the table from Sean Stevenson again? It just blows my mind. Other than that, Darren O'Lean, honestly, I don't know if you guys have seen the Netflix show Down to Earth with Zac Efron. Darren is Zac's kind of right-hand man, partner in crime, traveling the world, trying to save the world. And that was one that I love the show on Netflix. And next thing you know, we're talking like we were, we're talking on Instagram, and then we're hanging out, where he's been on the podcast twice now. And we link up, in real life as well. I'm just like, Chase, what are you doing, man? Like, how did you get here with these people? What's going on? But you just realize they're people too. They're people pursuing what matters most to them. And then they see that value in other people and they want to connect just as much as I do.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And, I've connected with Sean a couple of times too. And he has the same sort of genuine desire to truly connect. So much of his messages, unlike, some of the other texts I'm hearing, are actual voice messages.
Yeah.
He gets down and personal. He's like, "Hey, what's up?" And
he gets so gangsta.
Nice,
I love it.
Voice like
yeah, you see that voice note come through from Sean? I'm like, oh, this is gonna be good. Let me get somewhere quiet. I got to listen to this. It's gonna be good.
Speaking of podcasts, and one of the things that I feel so fortunate to be able to do is once you start building a platform, you really get to know the latest and greatest things that are coming out in the field and really be in the forefront of the thing you get to podcast about. Are you seeing any particular trends in the health space now or longevity space that you are sort of excited about and that people should be looking for?
Really, really great question. I want to preface this by saying first, for a while, I kind of have exposure problem. I'm surrounded by health and wellness, fitness, nutrition all the time. This was my career. And this is, like I said, the chunk of my material on the show. And so I definitely kind of get in ruts to where I'm like, all right, what are we going to talk about again? Okay, all right, calories in, calories out. Okay, sunlight's good for you. Okay, exercise is good for you. I'm downplaying a lot of this, but it definitely takes a lot for things to kind of stand out for me these days. But actually yesterday, the guest I was talking about from USC, shout out Dr. Kurt Hong, what he was talking to me about now in the world of longevity was really blowing my mind. Now, I'm sure you're no stranger to getting, exhaustive metabolic panels, hormone health panels, even genetic testing. What we all have access to now in terms of ease and cost reduction is leaps and bounds beyond what it was years ago. So that I'm very excited about. There are a lot of companies out there that offer that. They'll even come to you and do blood draw. And next thing you know, in 2 weeks, you got a 50-page report. That is amazing. But what he was talking to me about, a next step in longevity is really through nutrition and key supplementation. He's actually now seeing clinically proven ways to turn on and off genetic markers. So a lot of us for a long time now, we thought that, okay, this is my report. These are my genes. This is my predisposition. This is what, I have a higher or lower percentage chance of maybe acquiring in terms of a chronic illness, disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. If you are, I just wanted to let you know, join our community. There's so many free resources and a great community of people that desire health, happiness, human potential, to have more in their life, more health, more energy. And when you have those two things together, you could create more happiness, more abundance, whether it be financial, romantic, all these things in your life. And if you're just starting out, you don't know where to go, just sign up for thrivestatestarter.com, because in there, you're going to get a bundle of information that includes a longevity ebook, a longevity and performance resource guide, lecture notes that come from my keynotes at Google, at Fortune 500 companies, all the insights in that keynote in lecture slide form given to you. And then finally, breathwork. I share 3 powerful breathwork exercises to access calm, which really gives you clarity and peace during the day, to access energy if you need to wake up and really motivate yourself, and finally a breathwork routine that you could do every single morning so that you could be very intentional with how you create that day. You can find all this stuff delivered free to your inbox at thrivestatestarter.com. And our community is growing. If you want to be a part of a community of people that desire the Thrive State, that are really in Thrive State themselves and help other people along with that, you could be a part of the community. You can get group coaching from me. We do breathwork sessions, meditation sessions, and you also get to drop in and participate in podcasts in the future. You could find more about the community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. So check out those resources. You're not going to be disappointed. And please enjoy the remainder of this podcast.
And now what he was telling me is what they're doing is really being able to select these markers and hone in on them in a way to turn them on or off, like I said. And that is just next level to me. I mean, there's a lot we can do by optimizing sleep, hydration, nutrition, exercise. And like I said, many of us think that, oh, my genes are just my genes. But what we're seeing now is that's not the case anymore. And I'm floored by that.
I think we are definitely, I mean, the technology accelerating so fast and so much out there in terms of our ability to test for things. We've got stem cells, we've got exosomes, we've got gene editing, so much technology there. And then there's also a recent Netflix documentary Dan Boyner put out, Live to 100.
Yeah, the blue zones, yeah.
Yeah, and then on the other side of technology is just sort of how we show up in life. And for me, that's something that is super exciting to, and I think that's sort of almost like this new genre in longevity and performance really being about our consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the enemy, ego is the enemy, that scientists are beginning to learn more about a part of our brain called the default mode network that eventually really the seat of our ego, this primitive part of our brain nervous system that develops into our personality. But we also know that when that thing is on or active, it leads to many issues of, emotional imbalance with anxiety, depression, physical disease and whatnot. And so the enemy actually really is the ego. And when that thing's on, it actually turns on the stress response in our body. And when we can recognize that we are not our ego, that we are the love and the energy that's connected to everything else that's there, all of a sudden we start to turn off the stress response and we can start activating genes for longevity. That's been the exciting, part of my work as I, move into sort of epigenetics, but it's kind of social and behavioral epigenetics, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, the whole world of neuroscience and especially neuroplasticity and what we're understanding through a lot of different methods, through different stimuli, different treatments, but even getting into altered states of consciousness just through something like breath work or even ketamine-assisted psychotherapy and what all the research we're seeing around MDMA and psilocybin. Like, I could go down a rabbit hole on this stuff because it has had profound benefits for my life, especially mental health and navigating through PTSD. It's so much more than just these ego death experiences. It is profound, lasting change in our human physiology. We're seeing parts of the brain under these experiences turn on that, measured before, we never even saw light up before. Now we're seeing different parts of the brain talk with each other. It's almost like, hey, I didn't know you were at this party. You've been here the whole time. Like, how can we work together now? This neural crosstalk that doesn't end when that experience ends. We're actually seeing, there's a lot of debate around this, if humans actually have neurogenesis, actual creation of new neurons, or is it just more pseudo neurogenesis in terms of neurons firing that weren't before and now we're firing and wiring together and we're able to increase that crosstalk. So I think it's incredible, how we can have an experience that alters our thought during, but also changes our physiology and biochemistry long after. I mean, you walk away from a lot of these experiences and you are quite literally a different human. You're different. You have a different brain that is long lasting.
Absolutely. I found that, I lead breathwork experiences where, many people feel like they've healed so much trauma, I mean, they'll go compare it to like 20 years of therapy. And what we're able to know is we're able to quiet down, certainly with ketamine, with psilocybin, with some of these, psychedelics, they all seem to quiet down the default mode network in some way. And what we're able to see is this default mode is a way of just kind of collecting danger and trauma throughout our lives.
Oh, truly.
And protecting us against it. And if you become basically somebody who's not aware of this, you were basically approaching your life constantly just basically preparing for that danger or trauma, that you've had before in the past, and you can't see life any differently. And that version of yourself that is just in survival mode is not the person that could access the happiness, the joy, the gratitude that, potentially is in front of you, which is why, if you're able to just quiet that down for a second, if you could sort of almost link yourself to the true essence of who you are, which I believe is just love, then
truth.
All of a sudden, energetically, vibrationally, you start to shift. And and then your epigenetics shifts too, because the energy in which you feel, the energy in which you approach life becomes the environment which your cells listen to actually start switching on those genes on and off.
It reminds me of, I believe it was in Dr. Shauna Swan's work. You're familiar with the book Countdown? I believe it was in that book, but around the world of epigenetics and what we're able to do is profound, because when we look at experiences of trauma survivors, such as Holocaust survivors or rape victims and things like that, what we see in a lot of these epigenetics is like we can almost trace it back to a very specific, significantly stressful, near-death experience event that changes the way that these proteins wind down in the genetic structure. And so if we know this to be true, that, okay, this significantly traumatic, stressful event at that moment changes your DNA, is it that ludicrous to think that if we can let go of these stressful events, if we can unwind and step back from and turn off, or at least turn down this default mode network, why wouldn't it do the same thing? Or I should say maybe in reverse. The body is a very wild thing. And I think how it changes in one way, we can reverse engineer it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hope and at least potential for healing.
Oh, absolutely. I've done some work with True Diagnostic, the epigenetic company, and we know what happens with epigenetics is one modality is adding and subtracting methyl groups on the DNA, and that changes how it gets expressed. There are also different ways, different methods as well. And what we've noticed is sometimes some methyl groups don't get taken out, but it also starts to just shift how the DNA is being packaged up and wound around that. Even if you're not removing a methyl group, completely, your whole body's like shifted and transformed the way it starts to deal with different type of stresses in your body, so that that's no longer present. So that's pretty amazing stuff, that how we live our life and our consciousness actually shapes how our genes are being expressed on a moment-to-moment basis.
I mean, I'm not even going to begin to try and reiterate the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, but if anybody is more curious about this, just go check out what he's been up to for decades that is finally now, in my opinion, getting the accolade it deserves. We have so much potential, so much healing power potential for whatever we think we need to work on: a chronic illness, a disease, fear, stress, mental health, poor mental health, by just choosing first to work on it and choosing to believe that we can work on it and can heal from it and can work through it. It all has to come from your choice to choose you, to choose healing first. And then after that, I mean, just stack the conditions in the favor of the body and watch out.
Man, I could just sit and talk for hours about, different topics with you, I'm pretty sure. But, what's next for you? I knew you came out, you moved to Los Angeles to follow your now wife. What's next for the Ever Forward podcast, you and life personally? And if people were out there listening and there was something that you were going through right now, you're like, man, I wish I knew someone that could introduce me to X, or, some kind of support that you need. If you won't mind sharing and being vulnerable in that sense, what would that be? Yeah, what's next for you, and what can we do as a community to support you, Chase?
The first question, I think maybe a lot of people, when you ask that question, or when people get asked that, you naturally want to have an answer. Like, oh, this is what I've done, this is what I'm doing next, this is where I'm going, this is the next thing, the book, the speaking, the launch, the whatever. Total honesty, Ken, where I'm at now is I'm sitting with that. I'm sitting with that. There are several yet significant things going on in my life and my wife's life and our careers that just have us in deep appreciation for where we're at. Yeah. But it's a feeling, this kind of knowing that we've been through before, that something's about to change. There's something coming down the line in terms of different opportunities, locations, platforms. And so instead of trying to force something, we're honestly just really sitting with that and seeing where, all right, this is where I have resistance to change. This is maybe where I'm afraid to let go of something to step into the next thing. Why? What's going on there? What do I want versus what do I feel I'm being pulled into? Yeah. So total honesty, I'm sitting with that right now. And I have ideas of what I want to do, personal, egotistical, maybe driven aspirations and maybe even objective. And, oh, this is an obvious next step for what you've been doing to where to go next. I'm just making sure that I'm not rushing anything and I'm acting out of alignment with what I feel my life's calling is. And then in terms of support, I don't have anything I'm currently pushing. I don't have a call to action other than if anything that I've talked about strikes a chord with anybody listening, this is exactly what you can expect to hear over on Everforward Radio. It is all about physical and mental resiliency and how to move forward in key areas of our well-being every day. And that's exactly what I do. And we put out 2 episodes a week. And so if you want to come check out and support Everforward Radio, that would mean the world to me. And would love to take you along the journey.
Sounds great. So not only Everforward Radio, but if people want to sort of find out more about your work and things like that, where do they find you? Are you basically on every single platform?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Instagram is probably the one I'm most active on. You can find me at Chase_Chewning. But all the things you can also find at just ChaseChewning.com or EverforwardRadio.com. But yeah, if I'm not podcasting, I'm Instagramming or I'm probably getting coffee with somebody like yourself.
Beautiful. Look, you've interviewed so many people in the health and wellness space and beyond. You've done a lot of personal work, coached a bunch of people. But if you had to sort of have one answer as to what has been the best medicine in your life, what would you say?
Letting the right people into my life. Letting the walls down, particularly my wife. But I think, look, like I mentioned earlier, I've gone through a lot. I didn't have a lot of money growing up. I joined the military thinking I'm stepping out into my next calling in life, only to lose my hero just a couple of years later. Struggled with the meaning of life, struggled with wanting to be alive or not. I've had multiple, what I consider to be brothers from my time in the military, unfortunately take their own lives. I've seen way too much death and suicide over the years. I've had family dynamics. I've had career dynamics. I've been at the top of the top and the bottom of the bottom, just like everybody else has and will. And the thing that I think prohibited me the most from advancing forward, moving forward, maybe as quick as I wanted to, or just, I don't want to feel this pain anymore, was my own choice of not letting people in, was my own choice of keeping the walls up, and to the point of it drastically affecting my health. Going years with undiagnosed PTSD and just keeping all of that suppressed, and it quite literally manifested in the form of panic attacks and seizures and nearly crashing my vehicle and becoming unsafe, really in a movie theater and having to leave crowds and parties and, having an experience where my wife finally called me out. It's like, Chase, you're doing everything else, right? You're like, okay, cool, we get it. You can work out. Cool, you're strong. Okay, you got a great job. But just like, look, you can't even watch a movie with a death scene and not have a panic attack. You need to let me in. You need to let me know what's going on. And at that moment, it was more so like, I realized if I didn't, I don't know how much longer she would stick around. This is when we were early dating. And the fear of losing somebody that I loved so much, I cared more about letting her into my life for her own sake, but I didn't realize how much it was of a necessity of my own healing for me to actually say these things out loud and to get comfortable sharing my deepest fears and why I was having all these panic attacks. And so I would pass back to anybody, just find one person. I'd be willing to bet we probably already have that one person in our life that we are not truly 100% being open and honest with. And it is terrifying and it is scary and you don't know what is going to be on the other side of that conversation, but just lean into the trust, surrender to that relationship, surrender that they love you and want nothing but the best for you. And it doesn't mean you or they are going to have answers or solutions at that moment or after that first conversation. But when I say the weight of a world literally will leave your shoulders just by sharing this is an understatement. And then after that, the next step shows the next step, shows the next step. So do not keep it all in. Do not make the same mistake I did. Surrender to at least one person that you can drop all of your walls with, or put yourself in the position to develop that relationship, to nurture that relationship so that you can get to that point.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Who we are authentically as a soul and being able to express as that person, not having to put on a mask, is the ultimate healing and medicine. And I could certainly say in my own life as well. Chase, I hope you come back because, let's unpack that a little bit more because
Anytime, my man.
people have gone through life, certainly with traumas, and they put on all these different layers. And then if that's the layer you approach the rest of your life with, that's not who your soul really, really is.
And most of the time, we don't even realize it.
Yeah.
We have good intentions and we think we're, putting one foot in front of the other, but what we're actually doing is just layering masks. Yeah. And sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's subconscious, and we just got to get through the day. We got to get through our life. But take a moment, take a beat, and peel off one of those today. And I promise you'll find the version of yourself that has always been in there, but just you have been keeping from the world.
Yeah. Ooh, so beautiful. Whoa. Hey, we're going to stop there with that cliffhanger. We hope Chase returns on the Thrive State podcast. My brother, thank you for your smile and your deep, sexy voice, your wisdom, and for reaching out. And really, thanks for sharing what you know with us today on the Thrive State podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.
I hope you enjoy that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if you're finding that this content is really helping you and your family members, please consider supporting our mission and our cause of elevating health, happiness, and human potential for people all over the world. You can do so by making sure that you subscribe to this podcast, sharing it with your friends and family members, and leaving us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard. All these things are going to really help elevate the show and to give us the resources to continue to bring more content just like this to yourself as well as the people that you love. If you haven't already, you might want to consider joining our community. We actually have a community where people get to engage with me in group sessions where we do breath work, meditation, where we do challenges together, really to be able to get us access to health, happiness, human potential so that we could have longevity and performance in our life as well. You can check out our community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. And if you haven't already, pick up a copy of my book, Thrive State. It really gives you all the tools, the pillars that you need to create a blueprint to control the energetics of your life. Who are you? How you show up in the world? The choices that you consistently make create an energy in your body, and you can control this. And when you can control that, you also control the messages you give to your DNA that gives you access, again, to optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. And let me also just share a free gift to you. If you haven't already, please pick up my longevity and performance bundle where I share lecture notes, ebooks, breathwork exercises, and longevity and performance resources at thrivestatestarter.com. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. Thank you for helping us grow. Remember always, my friends, that you are your best medicine.